I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
When it comes to inspirational films, this one should never be ignored. It basically shaped a look for cyberpunk that has been replicated in live action and in anime films for decades. It also poses a question, one that has been relevant in recent years with the ever-increasing influence of AI in our lives. But is this masterpiece really a masterpiece? And is the movie any good? Let's find out. I'm Meffistoe. Like, share, and subscribe because this is my review of the movie Blade Runner.
You're reading a magazine, you come across a full-page nude photo of a girl.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
Blade Runner is a science fiction movie directed by Ridley Scott and written by Hampton Fancher and David Peoples. It is an adaptation of the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Hollywood was clamoring over his story and wanted to adapt it all the way back in the 70s, with Martin Scorsese attached to the project at one point in time. But of course, nothing came out of it. One iteration of the script was so bad, Philip K. Dick actually wanted to punch the writer involved. But in 1977, the book was optioned by Hampton Fancher, who wrote the first draft of the script. Then Ridley Scott was attached to the project, and several rewrites were done, which at the end of the pre-production, David Peoples came in and retouched the script. It was only after production was on the way that Philip K. Dick got a revised script, managed to see 20 minutes of the film, and then he gave his blessing. Alas, Dick died shortly before the movie was completed, and he never saw the full thing.
We create a cushion or pillow for their emotions, and consequently we can control them.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
In Blade Runner, we join a futuristic world. We're told that there are androids called replicants in order to travel to the stars ahead of humans and establish an off-world colony. But because people resented these artificial humans, they were built with a flaw. They die after 4 years. And in this world that has artificial humans, the only people that can tell them apart from actual humans are the Blade Runners. We join the story after a group of militant replicants left a colony, violently heading for Earth. One of them, named Leon, actually managed to get himself caught, but he killed the Blade Runner when he escaped.
You're in a desert, walking along in the sand when all of a sudden...
Is this the test now?
Yes, you're in a desert walking along in the sand when all of a sudden you look down.
So a former Blade Runner called Deckard was tapped and was put in charge to find these rogue group and bring them to swift justice.
Because no one's ever going to find out they're down here. Because you're going to spot them and you're going to air them out.
I don't work here anymore.
But it seems like Deckard is a little bit over his head. He is a master in spotting replicants, but he keeps running into resistance.
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard. If they're a benefit, it's not my problem.
One of the major components of Blade Runner are the visuals. On that front, the studio headed by Douglas Turnbull was in charge. Together with input from Scott himself, he created an amalgamation of Tokyo, Hong Kong, New York, and Chicago, all jumbled in and put together to be this vast, endless array of buildings, all on top of each other. If you've never seen the movie before, you'll recognize things that you might have seen in other films. Exposed pipelines, huge TV billboards, and numerous flashing signs all along the boulevards. This look is now forever tied into that cyberpunk aesthetic we come to know today. Inspired not only cyberpunk, but also the RPG game Shadowrun, movies like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, The Matrix, and The Terminator, with the latter helping to coin the phrase tech noir, meaning a sci-fi story that doesn't really have spaceships and space battles, but it is a tech story. And in the case of Blade Runner, a detective noir story as well.
I want to see it work on a person. I want to see a negative before I provide you with a positive.
What's that going to prove?
This, of course, didn't spring out of nowhere. It was inspired by the works of Moebius and Fritz Lang's Metropolis, amongst other things. And to tie that whole thing together is the magnificent score of Vangelis, that to me was a big highlight of the movie. Vangelis nailed that dark atmosphere of the city and that dark tone, which was the day-to-day lives of these people living in this oppressive city. In In terms of the cast, there are two essential major roles. One is Deckard, played by Harrison Ford. Deckard is an accomplished Blade Runner who decided to retire from the job, but he is pulled back in due to pressure from the head of the Tyrell Group, the people who actually built these replicants. And they did so through Deckard's old police captain. Ford was offered the role due to heavy recommendation by Steven Spielberg, who just finished wrapping Raiders of the Lost Ark with him and his work on Star Wars. And this role was the first time that Ford did a serious dramatic role like this, and it actually fit him well. Never once does he come off goofy like Han Solo or enthusiastic like Dr. Jones, but he did manage to make it look like he replaced the role of Jack Nicholson in Chinatown. Because Deckard is tough, resilient, and confident, but much like every detective in a noir story, he is flawed. I really enjoyed his acting in this movie, especially because it was so different from everything else he did at that time.
He say you Blade Runner.
Tell him I'm eating.
On the other side is Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty, the leader of the replicant revolters. Hauer was hired for the job because Ridley Scott loved him in his roles in the Paul Verhoeven earlier films. He was essentially hired without an audition, and with the blonde bleach hair, he epitomized what Scott was looking for in this Nietzschean Ubermensch. And with the few scenes that he had, Hauer stole the spotlight from any other actor in that scene, including Ford. He brought out that frustration of a being that knows his days are numbered because of the inherent 4-year lifespan and cannot do nothing about it. And through that last conversation with Deckard, we come to find out how deep that frustration really is. It was a masterclass of acting, one that Rutger Hauer was proud to say that it was his best performance.
All those moments will be lost in time.
And with all that gushing and positivity, I have to put things in perspective. The movie is boring. There are long stretches of time that nothing really happens, and there's barely any advancement in the story. And this review covers all 4 different versions of this movie. Yes, 4 different cuts of the movie exist. The movie heavily relies on big info dumps and only a few scenes that are actually worth watching. And it is a shame because in those scenes, you miss great performances by William Sanderson, Sean Young, and Edward Olmos. For the longest time, I held this movie in high regard, but after a recent rewatch, it just felt like a chore. The visuals and the music still hold up, but the story just takes too long to tell and could have been condensed into about 90 minutes. On this channel, I really try to encourage people to watch movies that they haven't seen before, so I will recommend you watch this film to get an idea about the full breadth of the story, but you only need to watch it just once. Because the movie ain't bad, it is very culturally significant, but I found myself yawning through many parts of it during my watch. I just hope you find it interesting.
The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and you have burned so very, very brightly, Roy.
I thank you for watching, and remember, hope is a good thing, maybe even the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. I'll see you on the next video.